Yes, this evening's Board of Selectmen meeting is brought to you by, so everybody ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess you can turn it on. So welcome everyone to the March 17th Medfield Board of Selectmen's meeting, the special St. Patrick's Day pandemic and first heavy virtual session version of the Board of Selectmen's meeting we've ever had. So for those of you who are joining us through Medfield TV, welcome. I'm glad to have you on board. We have a fairly light agenda tonight, and so I don't think the meeting will go extra long. But for anyone who is watching, if you have any comments or questions, I believe that you have the ability to send us messages through the streaming.
They can send it through Facebook Live, or they can email me and we
Yes.
can go through their
Okay.
questions.
And the reason we're doing this tonight is because the state has relaxed some of the open meeting law rules, although the three of us are here, so we're not using remote participation on the Board of Selectmen.
We are 6 feet apart from each other.
We are 6 feet apart, yeah, and as is everyone else in this room. And we're not even looking at each other in the face where we'd be breathing on each other. I guess you all, if you're listening to this online, you already know how to get to us, so I'm not going to bother calling out websites because I think you already know how to do that. If you've got it on TV, you know how to do it. If you need to, you can also find it being streamed on Facebook at https://Facebook, www.facebook.com/Medfield TV/. Probably should write that down, find a way to do that stuff. The members of the public who wish to comment or ask questions about the topics below may do so by submitting a comment on the stream of the meeting at the same one I just gave you, https://www.facebook.com/Medfield TV/ or email at ktrierweiler, that's KTRIERWEILER @medfield.net. With that as an introduction, I'd like for a minute here for the people in the room and for those of you listening in to just take a moment of appreciation for the members of our armed forces who are serving across the globe to protect our country.
And Mr. Chairman, we might want to especially remember Phil Burr.
That was my second item, but yes, I will point that out. Phil Burr's funeral was today. Phil Burr, 90-year-old, longstanding Medfield resident, longstanding member of the Legion, World War II veteran, highly decorated, well-regarded across town. I made a comment, I was at the cemetery after the funeral, and I made a comment that there are a number of people here in town who've been long-term residents that I didn't fully appreciate who they are and the contribution they've made over their lives until I read about it in their eulogy. I'm glad to learn, but I always feel a little bit bad that I didn't know some of the stuff ahead of time when I actually had a chance to meet them and talk with them.
It was impressive to read about his actions that led to his getting, I think it was called the Valor of Honor or something, medal.
The Navy, it's the Navy Cross, I think I brought it with me and then I left it on my desk, but it's the Navy Cross, I think is what he got. And I think he was wounded 3 times in the single event and kept, in fact, they said in the write-up he was, I don't know how you continue to command from the litter and where the medics are taking care of you, but I would have loved to have asked how he did that because that's impressive. I would also like to point out one thing, given the circumstance of the last week. I would just like to recognize the Board of Health and our first responders, both the police side and the fire, but every once in a while a town gets tested in ways that we don't see coming. And in this particular case, the Board of Health has played a leading role in helping the town navigate its way through this current health issue that we're facing. And from everything I understand, they have risen to the, first off, they bring a lot of expertise to the table in the first place, but they've risen to the challenge. They're doing a good job. They're doing, and I know Chief Garrett's here and Chief Carrico was here. It's also with the support of the first responders. So in particular, tonight's meeting, it's appropriate to recognize that here in town. We have some people who are highly competent, dedicated, and are doing us great service to help us navigate through this. With that, the first action item I have here is to declare a local state of emergency. You want me to read it, or do we just?
Oh, you can read it.
Okay. And the issue on the table will be for the Board of Selectmen to declare this state of emergency and authorize me as the chair of the board to sign it. Emergency declaration, whereas a sudden, generally unexpected occurrence of circumstances demanding public action has arisen within the town of Medfield, and whereas the Board of Selectmen of the town of Medfield, Massachusetts, upon advice from the Director of Emergency Management, have determined that COVID-19 poses a present, reasonable, and imminent potential danger to public health, safety, or general welfare of the people of Medfield or their property, so that it has become necessary for the director to utilize and coordinate the services, equipment, supplies, and facilities of existing departments, offices, and agencies, or the community for the purposes of emergency management and emergency functions. And whereas the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has determined that immediate public action is needed to prevent, minimize, or mitigate damage to the public health, safety, or general welfare of the people of Medfield or their property, which may otherwise result from COVID-19, and that taking the time required to comply with the various state and local procurement laws would endanger the health or safety of the people or their property. And whereas the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has declared that a state of emergency be declared in the Commonwealth, now therefore I, Gustav H. Murby, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen of the Community of Medfield, Massachusetts, hereby declare that as of 7 p.m., March 17th, 2020, a state of emergency exists in the community of Medfield. This declaration of emergency shall remain in effect until notice is given, pursuant to the recommendations of the Director of Emergency Management and my judgment that the state of emergency no longer exists. They'll be signed with today's date by me.
So that should actually be amended to be the Board of Health, the Board of Selectmen, and all three of you voted, rather than do individually.
Do we need to change it, so we'll change the words?
Yeah.
So it'll be, say that again. So it's the Director of Emergency Management, the Board of Health.
No, I'm sorry.
The judgment of the Board of
Just strike
Selectmen.
Strike your name on the now therefore. So,
Oh.
Chairman, so it just says the Board of Selectmen hereby declare.
Good. I feel less exposed doing it that way. This is good. So the board,
The last line,
so-
change mine to
our judgment. I like that too. Okay.
Well, let's just make it the judgment
Do
of
we
the Board
need-
of Selectmen, just
What?
so it's the entity, not us personally.
That's correct.
That's better.
Presumably, it'll be the same three of us, but who knows how long the state of emergency will last, so.
Mark, did I hear you say that it should be voted?
Absolutely.
So moved.
I have one administrative question. You mentioned the Board of Health. Board of
No,
Health?
that was,
You misspoke.
Okay.
And then I just had two, we need an extra comma in one spot, and then when we switch from Gus to the board, it's gotta be declares instead of declare, but that's,
Hereby declares, yes.
well, if you take out the I and just say the Board of Selectmen can declare, actually. You don't need to put the S in that, because the board is a singular body.
yes.
Board declares,
Right.
so we're good with the declares.
So just to read that last paragraph again to make it official, now therefore, the Board of Selectmen of the Community of Medfield, Massachusetts hereby declares that as of 7 p.m., March 17th, 2020, a state of emergency exists in the community of Medfield. This declaration of emergency shall remain in effect until notice is given, pursuant to the recommendations of the Director of Emergency Management and our judgment. Is it okay to use
Say
our?
the judgment of the Board of
The
Selectmen.
judgment of the Board of Selectmen, I agree with that. And the judgment of the Board. Okay, I'm not going to read that whole paragraph, just the last sentence. This declaration of emergency shall remain in effect until notice is given pursuant to the recommendations of the Director of Emergency Management and the judgment of the Board of Selectmen that the state of emergency no longer exists. Signed, Gustav H. Murphy, Chairman, Board of Selectmen, Town of Medfield, today's date.
And if people aren't aware, the Director of Emergency Management is the fire chief.
Correct.
Correct.
So moved.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
All right.
So then, Christine, you'll give me a clean
Yes,
copy
we'll
of
give you a clean before you leave tonight.
Okay. Okay. Next item on the list is Police Chief Garrett requests the appointment of Garrett Ledbetter, William Bento, and Michael Downing to the position of police recruit effective on the start date of their police academy. Seniority for the position will be based in the order outlined above.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, Chief.
So you basically summed up what I'm here for tonight. It's good news for the police department as we've had staffing shortages this last year. We went through the civil service process, which slowed us down a little bit, so we are very excited at this point to have 3 candidates that have successfully completed the tests necessary and are ready to begin the academy. 2 of them are scheduled to start on April 13th at the Randolph Police Academy. They have their orientation scheduled for next Tuesday. We have been given word that as of right now, the academies will continue despite the restrictions that the governor has put in place. They recognize that first responders, law enforcement personnel are going to be in dire need as this crisis moves forward and we work through some of the logistics. So I think they're making aggressive efforts to ensure that we have personnel available to us. One of the candidates is currently enrolled at Fitchburg in a hybrid program, which allows him to complete his bachelor's degree and the police academy and the modified academy. His start date will be in May, and we anticipate all 3 of them coming to the department with successful completion of the academy in September.
Can you tell us anything about these 3 gentlemen?
All 3 of them are residents of Medfield. One of the individuals, Mr. Ledbetter, had applied for our department before, had finished very well in the process, but after our vetting process, we determined that he did not have the requisite year as a resident in town prior to his taking the test. It was unfortunate for him, but true to his dedication to this department, he waited 2 years, tested again, and came out on top again this time. So I think he showed a real passion for staying loyal to Medfield, even though he was let down initially. The second candidate is Will Bento. His sister is currently a detective in our police department. He comes from a law enforcement family. He's a bright young man. He's attending Fitchburg right now in this hybrid program. He's been elected their class leader, so he's demonstrated some strong leadership skills, and he's definitely wise beyond his years. And then the third candidate is Mr. Downing. Mr. Downing had applied with us before, has gone on to get a little more experience as a emergency dispatcher for a neighboring town. He came back and did very well in his process again, and is eager to come into the department.
Will Bento in Fitchburg, you said he finishes in May?
He gets his degree in May. He'll start the MPTC hybrid program.
Oh, okay.
He'll graduate in September.
So all 3 of them are available in September. I'm thinking of last summer when you were scrambling and saying, are any of them ready beforehand? But no, okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
told you that it was going to be
Okay.
a good
Yeah.
year or so.
Okay.
And do we have anyone else in the pipeline?
We do, so we have another candidate, Terrence Tian, who is currently waitlisted in Randolph. We are hopeful, not to be the detriment of any other department or candidate, but we're hopeful that they get to him on the wait list. If not, we are making efforts to get him into the next academy, which is due to start in August, I believe. And then we are awaiting one military person who's deployed right now to come in, and he'll undergo the background process. And we have our final candidate, who is Joseph Schibertes, who is a dispatcher for us. There's a delay that I'm not privy to discussing right now.
Well, that's good. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's
all
great.
good news that
Yeah.
we are hopefully getting, by the fall, we'll be closer to full.
That's our goal.
So Mr. Tians, is he a Medfield, is he one of the Tians that grew up in town?
That's correct, yes.
And Mr. Shiverty's grew up in town, so
Yes.
how about that third person that you were just mentioning at the end?
He is not currently a resident, nor
Okay.
has he been a resident, but provisions under civil service that if actively deployed at any time during the year that the test was given, you can establish residency either in your town or a town of your choosing, so long as you move into the town within a set period of time. That is a dialogue that I have engaged this candidate on several occasions. He is, my understanding is he is now back into some type of setting and going to finish out his active deployment soon. So I think we'll have an answer from him
Great.
very shortly.
Great.
So are we able to then have officers that live in town? Is that how the system allows us to do that now? I thought the list was open so that we had to take people from everywhere, basically.
So residency is your preference. So if,
We can have a preference for residents.
well, no, not us, civil service determines the preference.
Okay.
So in the line of duty deaths, their children, if they so wish to come into the police department, will always get first preference. Then it goes down by residents in your town, and then it goes into disabled veterans.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
So I would move that we appoint the 3 candidates.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All set?
Is there anything else that you want to ask of me while I'm here? Okay.
Does that need to be conditioned upon anything?
They've already met all of the requisite conditions at this point, background, PAT, physical, drug testing.
Just checking.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Is there anything we should have been asking? Okay, thanks, Chief. We always, after this question sinks in a little bit, it's like, maybe there was something we should have asked her, but, okay. Let's see, Selectmen are requested to vote to sign the ADA contract with Community Opportunities Group. I guess that's by itself.
Yes, Nick can give you a quick update.
Nick?
We are procuring the consultant services of Community Opportunities Group, who we've used before in the town. We did a procurement. They were the best respondent on price and quality. This is the project that is funded by the $40,000 for the state grant. As it is shaping up now, we should save the state some money based on the contract price.
So that was my first question, is this a grant-funded contract? And I thought the answer would be yes. And then the only other observation I'd make, I don't know if Evelyn's here tonight, but that required a notarized signature.
Yes.
Okay. So we have to come back in to do it, yeah,
Yep.
but, okay.
We'll find you a notary.
And I think that one was 3 of our signatures, or just, I think that's all 3 signatures on that one?
That one, I believe, will be all 3.
Yeah.
We'll have to circle back to you because they have
Okay.
not signed it yet either.
Okay.
So we're waiting for them to send
Okay,
it to us
okay.
before you folks sign it.
I was just going to offer to notarize for you, Gus, but
We'll hold till they send us the sign. We just want to be able to move forward as
Mark's
soon as they
notary.
send it to us.
I am.
Oh, well, if you had it, we could sign it. So,
Yeah.
motion to approve that contract.
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's done, okay. Next item is a request to appoint Tracy Klink as the Assistant Town Clerk.
So as you know, back in January, my plan was to appoint 2 assistant town clerks. Marianne Benaldi was one. We had an employee who was not able to be the second one. Tracy currently works in the Water and Sewer Department, and she is filling in when Marianne is working for the Planning Department. So we're trying to get as many people trained and cross-trained as we can.
So moved.
Let me ask a question then. The only question I have is, we've had this discussion around town clerk. The question I have is this short-term to get us through the year till the next, so this is not a long-term policy decision we made about staffing?
In fact, Tracy will probably only be functioning until the water bills need to go out, and then she'll be
Okay.
transitioning back to do the water bills. She's just helping out here and there when we need
Great.
Marianne somewhere
Okay,
else.
okay.
Yeah.
So,
So moved.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye. Yep.
Aye, okay. Next one is a request to appoint a Deputy Planning Inspector, Bob Pierschak, as...
Plumbing inspector.
I gotta put my glasses on. Yeah, plumbing inspector, sorry.
Good evening. Yeah, we, in discussions with our plumbing and gas inspector, Jack Rose, and looking, we have a deputy inspector currently appointed. However, his availability has been difficult. He still runs a plumbing business, as well as he's a deputy plumbing inspector in several other towns. Doesn't live locally. So Jack and I interviewed Mr. Piersak. He's a Medfield resident. He's a master plumber. He's still operating a business, but his availability is he's available a lot more. No questions about his qualifications, and Jack will train him. So we've requested that the board appoint him as a deputy plumbing inspector.
And is the plan that he will replace Jack, or is it just you'll have two deputies? You'll have two deputies.
He's going to be some backup for Jack,
Okay.
which ideally we wish we had in place now, because we would prefer to limit Jack's exposure in the field. But we have scaled back our inspections to a degree, but we'll probably get Bob up and running fairly quickly. So
Okay.
it would be nice to have that a local option available both for emergencies and obviously to take some of the load off Jack Rose. So.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks. Gary. We're going to set a new record here tonight. Is there anything on the budget or the warrant articles?
So I left it on the agenda. Obviously, the governor and the legislature are working to address what our plan will be going forward for town meeting and how we're going to deal with ultimately what's going to be a budget situation based on what we're doing. So we're going to hold off right now. The warrant committee canceled their meeting last night. And we're going to hold off talking about the budget till we get a little more information about where this is going. But I did receive an email from Pete tonight that he would like to talk about the energy manager position, which I assume would fall under the town meeting warrant
all right.
article
Is this the time to do it then?
section. Yeah.
Sure.
I have handouts. So Marie is, well, let me give her the microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marie Zach Nolan is a member of the Energy Committee, and she had researched the possibility of, well, she was researching what other towns were doing, and she found that in Winchester, a longtime Energy Committee member became the consultant to the town of Winchester for around $20,000 to $25,000 a year, not an employee, but a 1099 consultant. And for that, she basically manages their energy services for them. And she guesstimated that would be that we would, if we wanted to do the similar sort of thing, and she does it for a number of towns. She does it, there's a list of the towns that she does it for. Winchester, Woburn, Waltham, Stoneham, Malden. And the last list is in the very fine print. You can see that she's getting a lot of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for these towns in grant money. So that for very short money, she's making these towns a lot of money through the grant process. And she's willing to come and talk to the board about the possibility of doing this for Medfield. In addition to the grants that she's gotten for Winchester and these other towns, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, she also mentions that she was involved in the community energy aggregation in Winchester, which she said is saving the town over $1 million a year. I know
Is that saving the people in the town $1 million?
in the town, I think, because the community aggregation is a system by which the town opts into it, and then everybody is assigned to the provider that the town has selected, the idea is one, that you try to save on energy costs, and secondly, you try to have greener energy usage. At the Energy Committee meeting that we held recently, Jeremy Marcet is the Warrant Committee's representative to the Energy Committee, and Jeremy is the facilities, not the facilities, he's the Director of Public Works for the town of Natick. And he shared that Natick had done this community aggregation several years ago, and they're saving huge amounts of money for the residents as well. So it sounds like it's a good idea. I know that, Gus, you didn't like the idea of the fact that would be forcing people in, but everybody in town has the ability to opt out.
So my only objection is, so don't make it opt out, make it opt in, and then I'm on board with this totally. And if you have a way, well, why not?
It doesn't, well, the statute,
The program.
Well, I guess
in the
I'd want to see,
statute,
I guess I'd want to see that then. Because that's, to me, if you're going to save people $1 million a year, you don't have to force them. There's a deeper reason why I feel that way. When you force people to do things, and this is the environment, when people are forced to do things, they, A, don't take responsibility for it, and B, they don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. So it seems like it's an easy thing to force something to happen. Now, if in fact we're finding ways to save the people $1 million a year, and if I see this thing that says, oh, no, you can't have them opt in, you can't have them act logically, you can't give them the freedom to make their own decisions, I might get talked out of that, because if in fact we can deliver $1 million in savings and they can opt out,
Yeah,
I just think that that's a deeply flawed strategy for building environmental responsibility on the part of the public. That's actually where I'm coming from.
So, I mean, I think the impetus of the program originally is more money saving than it is environment. I mean, I think the original idea was
So you don't have to force people to sign up to save
allow.
money.
Well, I mean, again, I don't know the whole history, but I could imagine why you would do it this way.
Oh, I know why you'd do it this way if you were trying to force people. No, I've read about the psychological studies about defaults. It's what we do with 401ks. They realize that if you basically have a new employee default to being in the 401k, you have more people putting money into their retirement account. That one I don't have a problem with, because it's all going to them. But I do have a problem when that's used as a lever to manipulate people.
Because you need the numbers in order for it to work, so that's.
So the real issue for tonight is that that's just a corollary issue. This
Yeah.
whole community energy aggregation is a separate issue, really. What I'm trying to present to you tonight is the suggestion that we invite this woman
Yeah.
who runs this Spark Energy Conservation group to come down and do a presentation to us and see if this is the sort of program that could work for Medfield and get us those hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant money that we've been missing for the past several years.
So there's two things. Well, yeah, absolutely. Let's have her come in and talk to us. But
Okay.
just my questions first. A couple things. One, I would make sure Amy has a copy of this, because I think that she would be the logical person that would work, I would think, with whoever does this.
Amy already has a copy of it.
Okay. The other question I have, just in looking, because I did see it before the meeting, is Fred came in and told us we got about $500,000 of projects. We have projects that would return $500,000 to the town that we've already identified, which I would look at as having, that's a need for a project manager to carry projects out. And I would only, when she comes, I'd only want to understand whether she's the person who can meet that need. Because what I've read, it sounds like she does grant writing. There's nothing wrong with grant writing. I'm not against, like if she's $25,000 a year, my guess is she's bringing in a whole lot more than that in grant money. And so I'm not fighting that problem. It's not a problem.
That's the last page. You know, it's hundreds of thousands a year per
but
town.
my point is, but our immediate thing is also a need for someone who can carry out these projects to see, so we get this $500,000 savings that Fred has. So in the Green Committee annual report, there are a whole set of initiatives that collectively will deliver something on the order, I think Fred said on the order of $500,000 in savings to the town. In order to get those to happen, you have to have someone to carry those initiatives out. So that's more of a project management role and actually making sure those things happen. as opposed to the grant writing. I'm not against the grant writing, I'm just saying, is that something she can also help us with? Because we have money that we could save if we could only carry those, undertake those
and I'm sure that
initiatives.
she'd be willing,
Yeah.
it sounds to me like she has the sort of consulting business where she'd be very happy to help you with that sort of thing. Additionally, we've got a deadline in two weeks, I think, on March 27, when we have to file our Green Communities report with the state.
No, it's it's not the report, it's the application
For the next round of grants.
for the grants.
It's on the screen as well. I think it may need to be extended because of what's going on.
All right, so that we had a deadline of March 27, may get extended, but, and we have, and the employee who's assigned to doing that is having personal medical issues with a family member, and so that we may have a specific topic that this sort of person could help us with in the next couple of weeks. Because if we don't get that report in, then we miss another cycle of the green
I
communities
think our
grants.
priority is getting it in. Obviously, the last 2 weeks, our priority has been health and safety for the residents and staff. Amy hasn't been available. Amy's just transitioning back into work now. I think we'll try and get it done, but I find it hard to believe that the state's going to hold us on a March 27th deadline, given what's going on. None of us have any time to be allocated to anything right now other than what we're doing for the
As a
fire.
practical matter, she's not going to be on board unless there is a significant extension. There's no way, even if we chose to do something expeditious, to bring her on board before the 20th, in time for that, because we won't, if she comes in next time, we're meeting next Tuesday, I believe.
Right.
that's the
Right now, we're
24th.
scheduled to meet next Tuesday. We will most likely not be holding the warrant hearing next Tuesday.
Right.
We're going to
Okay.
hold on that. But right now, we're scheduled to meet. Given the way things are changing on a daily basis, there could be an emergency meeting before that as well. But
I'm just trying to figure out relative to if the deadline didn't slip. We have to have a grant application in by the 27th if we want to get something for this coming fiscal year. She would.
I'm not sure it's the grant application. I understood it to be the
it's
report.
the
it's a
report.
great-
I think we're all committed to getting the report in by the 27th. But obviously,
thought-
we'll have
didn't
You already signed the report and submitted.
Well, no, that was last. I guess that was last year's
I think it's
report,
the next one.
but I didn't sign it until the summer. When Fred was here, I'm almost positive it was the grant application. Nick, was it the grant
I can't
application?
remember what it is.
I could have sworn he said it was the grant application that had to be in by the
It is a grant
27th.
application, and I did contact the
Okay.
OER today, as I'm sure many other communities have, to request that they extend the deadline due to
Okay.
what's going on.
Okay.
And we heard that we should receive an email soon about with some sort of announcement, but I don't know what. that
Sometime
announcement
before the 27th. Yeah. Okay.
Because, it's not just this. There are multiple grant applications that are ongoing for other things, so we're looking for relief on a
Yeah.
significant number.
Yeah, well, I mean, just on the surface, it looks like for what it would cost us to bring someone like this on board, we have reason to believe it would more than pay, it more than pay for itself. And what I like about it is that the issue, I think, Mike, you may have shared as well, is that hiring someone before you actually, not that we would never consider it, but before you know that you have a need to hire someone as an employee for a long-term basis, it's kind of nice to be able to really test the water and see what's out there and get a better sense of that. So I like this strategy a lot
Yeah,
better.
this is a much preferable way of doing
Yeah.
it, certainly.
Yeah, and it seems like the main issue for the main work product that we need is grant writing, because we actually do have the people who could manage the project. So to the extent it's going to be an energy conservation matter in the buildings, Amy, that's her job, is she oversees the facilities, and she can manage the implementation if it's going to be. I mean, she's already gotten us grants, and she's already done that work, and she can certainly oversee to the extent you're installing boilers and putting new lights in and that sort of thing. With respect to vehicles, now that we have kind of the vehicles in town that have kind of come under the auspices of the DPW and our vehicle management system, that's something that would be managed through the DPW. So I don't think we would need somebody to oversee those things, because that's just going to be part of, if we got a grant to replace 4 cars, well, Mo would just oversee the replacement of 4 cars. You don't need a project manager to project manage.
The issues, so I would like to know that Amy feels the same way, because that's helpful to me. If you're right, Mike, and that really what we need are grant writers, that's different. I was more concerned about, because the initiatives that are in the annual report, there's a number of them, and some of them are sizable initiatives. So there's, if an Amy is actually fine with overseeing all those initiatives, I'm actually, that's great. I'm saying the grant writing kind of gets you the seeds to plant in the field, but when you do, somebody's got to be harvesting this stuff, and that's those initiatives. If she's comfortable doing it, and I'm guessing a lot of it does have to do with letting contracts and managing contracts. It's not like you're out technically directing any of this. If that's true, then yeah, I'm even more on board with what I saw in here, because it was grant writing as opposed to the project management stuff.
So as an outside observer of Amy and comparing her to Jerry, I mean, Jerry, when McCarthy used to come to all the Energy Committee meetings, and so that we used to see him at the Energy Committee all the time.
I'm uncomfortable with this conversation. This is not specifically on the agenda, and we're talking about the performance of an employee compared to another employee. I have to stop you right there.
Okay.
I think that's a conversation we have to have in a different forum.
Yeah. The one piece of that I think is relevant is if we were bringing somebody on board, I would anticipate that any resources we bring on board to pursue energy conservation measures would be resources that would come under the umbrella of the facilities manager. That's
I think
the
it would
only
depend
part
on what the project was. Like, I'm just looking down this list on this thing here, right? So, for
Yep.
example, streetlights. I mean, we don't need to hire anybody to have the streetlights replaced. We're already replacing the streetlights,
We already did.
right?
Yeah.
Somebody else is going to do that. I mean, some of this is, if it's a facilities issue, it falls into the facilities department. If it's a vehicle issue, it falls into the
Well,
vehicle
that's fair,
department.
yeah.
We don't need to hire somebody to go to the energy committee meetings. We need to hire somebody to do specific sets of things.
No, my issue is not hiring somebody to go to a meeting, it's whether or not the person has enough bandwidth to do it.
Well, right.
Yeah, but that's the resource
Too
issue.
much of somebody.
If we're hiring
Yeah.
these person to write the grants, you'd be hiring them to do a specific set of things, and either they give you, we'll write these 10 grants, we'll have this number of hours, I mean, they would be in the contract exactly what they were gonna do. I mean, I think where we were on, at least in the last meeting, it sounded like there's about 100 hours worth of work. I'm sure they'll come up with some more work for them to do. But that's what you sort of need is, okay, here's the things we think we're going to need. Here's the stuff that's on the list of the things in the report. We'd like to apply for these 4 grants for these 3 projects, and it's going to take 25 hours to write those grants, and they'll write those grants. And if there's some other piece of it that's got to be done, if it's a one-off kind of a project, then it's a one-off kind of a project, right? I mean, you might have a one-off project that requires additional outside support that would hopefully be supported by a grant. I think if you're going to hire a consultant, it's a much better way to go because you can scope out this is what they're going to do. We're going to request bids for someone to do these 22 things and tell us how much you're going to charge us for that work.
My point is, I'm happy to listen to arguments around, for capacity. I'm happy to listen to that. My comments were all directed around how do we actually manage the person that does this. And if the answer is, well, it's not facilities, that's fine. But right now, I'm working off the assumption that it would be because so much of this will be involving. So I was looking at management structure. I wasn't challenging capacity. So. Yep, Mark?
So I don't know, am I supposed to have a microphone or?
Probably.
Go to the podium.
I hear you.
You can have this one if you want. I don't know. This is for
We're
the,
not sharing microphones. Oh, that's an extra one.
yeah, that's the extra. That's the,
Board of Health left me with specific rules today.
My only point is there's little bits of red flags here in this history.
mhm.
You need to inquire as to the nature of her company. What she was doing in Winchester in the first place, and what her relationship with Winchester kind of evolved into something. If you've got somebody who is an individual and they're doing work for your community, there's a very heavy burden to prove that that person's an independent contractor. Now, at the point where she expands and is working in other communities, that makes it a stronger case, and with lack of oversight. And now she's also got people working for her, so the issue then becomes, who are those people? And we need to have assurance that those people are in fact being treated as employees of hers and not more independent contractors.
Well, actually, one of the things that was in here, Mark, that surprised, one of the things, to your point, she indicated in here she was happy to have people from the town staff join with her in these efforts. But then, at the very end, it said, and become employees of my company. So if anything, I had the opposite concern that you did, which was not so much that we would have a bunch of grapes of independent contractors, but that we might have some town employees that we would like to take on a responsibility. But she indicated that they would then become her employees, which was like, well, I don't know that we want to lose town employees.
Not just that,
So-
you cannot be a full-time municipal employee and work for somebody else.
Right,
that
right,
has-
right.
And have a contract interest adverse to the community, so that's.
But that's that would be an issue that would be worth fleshing out if she comes to talk to us, so. Anyway, to your point, Pete, that format for having somebody to help us works better for me as a short-term solution because it's a contractor, you're not obligated.
This
Yeah.
absolutely seemed preferable
Yeah.
to me, too, when
Yeah.
I saw it.
Yeah. So, I'm okay with bringing her in, sure. You're okay with that, I assume, Mike?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to hear about it, as long as we, scope out what would, I don't know, would this fall within, for $20,000 to $25,000 a year, would that be below we wouldn't have to do a competitive bid for that, so.
So the other discussion was whether or not, since this is a way for creating economic advantage to the town, whether part of this money could perhaps come from the Selectmen's Economic Development Fund, the $15,000 a year that we have. We have apparently about $9,000 in it at the moment. We're slated to get another $15,000. Some of that goes to the holiday stroll, which we want to probably keep supporting. But my sense was that through the grants, there was a $10,000 chunk that was able to go towards the administration, towards a person, basically. So that I think it's financially doable.
Yeah. If we get down the road far enough where we want to bring her on board, then or bring someone like this on board, and even if it wasn't her, then I think we'd have to figure out how to finance it. Just use that slush fund that Christine has built into the FY21 budget.
Yeah, there have been, before this all happened, and we were actively talking about the budget every day, the warrant committee had already, I don't know if it's threatened or promised that we were cutting that 15,000, so we may need a separate
Yeah.
appropriation.
Yep. Oh, well. Anything else on the budget or the warrant articles?
No.
Okay. Licenses and permits, we had a request to allow the display of the April is Donate Life Month in the Town Hall lobby. I assume this is effectively this exact same request that we had from a year ago.
It's the same request we get every year. Currently, as you know, the town hall is closed to the public. So going forward, I would just recommend that if we open later than April, that we allow it to stay up possibly through May, when we allow the public back in.
Can we maybe hang the banner in the window out front or something to?
One of these
Yeah,
windows,
sure.
from top floor.
I would move to allow that.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, that passes. Town administrator update.
So I just have a couple of things. Obviously, it's been a very busy week. It's been a stressful week for our staff and our residents. I think it's one thing to watch on the news, read online the things that are happening around the country, but I think it's a little harder when you see it actually happening in our small town. Some of the things that we've seen this week, patience and cooperation from our residents, asking basic questions, making sure we get those services delivered. The number of people who have called to volunteer to bring our seniors food, to do grocery shopping for them. It just, Medfield's always a really kind place, but when it's something like this, it really, really shows what an amazing town we are. So I just thank everybody for all their help this week, their patience and understanding about all of our closures. And, we're working to keep our level of service. Email us, call us. We'll try and get your questions answered and try and get you back in the buildings as soon as we can. So, thank you.
Selectmen?
So I've got nothing. I would echo what Christine said and extend the thanks to Christine and to Nick and to, as Gus mentioned at the outset, to the Board of Health and all the people who work for the town who have had to put in lots of time, nights and weekends, and try to sort all this stuff out. It's amazing how many different moving parts there are, how many different meetings and buildings and events and things you have to think about to try to manage, even in a town as small as ours. And I think it's fairly remarkable how quickly we've sort of figured this out and figured out how we're going to do it. And I don't think there's been any great interruption or disturbance in what we've been doing as a town. And it seems to be true for the Commonwealth generally. I mean, I went into the office on Monday, and it was really only a week ago people started making these shifts. There was almost nobody on the train. There was almost nobody downtown. It seems as though all of our clients have shifted into some sort of remote work really overnight over the course of a week, and people who hadn't worked remotely before and are kind of keeping things moving where they can. And I think especially for those businesses in town and elsewhere that rely upon people coming in and showing up, I think if we could all do our best to take a break from stocking up on toilet paper and eat a few dinners and lunches out, and because particularly the restaurants are going to be really hurting almost immediately, already have been, given the declines, and it's going to get worse for them, regardless of what kind of relief
I
program.
was able to park tonight in the lot out here,
Yeah.
and I assume that was because of Avenue.
Yeah. So a lot of restaurants that have not previously delivered or haven't had takeout or curbside service are now adopting it to try to keep going. And so if we could keep an eye out for those businesses and do our best to keep patronizing them even while we're holed up, I think that would be great.
I think, just you reminded me of something. I think one of the things we asked all the staff members to do on Monday was to create a list of everything that we would need to think about canceling or what we were doing. And, you know, everybody always says you should look at the positive. The list of events that we run on a weekly basis in town are unbelievable. From pretty much every department and every building. It's pretty great.
Pete?
I guess I would second what Chris and Mike have said. I think that the people in town have really responded admirably. You see it in several different ways and forms, and so that's encouraging. And I think I would also like to reiterate what Mike said. I think that Chris and Nick have done just an excellent job of leading the town, so I thank you both for doing that.
Thank you. We have a really great team. Nick's been incredibly beneficial. It was the best decision I've made this year to bring him on. I know you all feel that way about the people that you've hired, but your department heads, right down to the pages of the library, have been absolutely fantastic and able to make our jobs much easier. So they really deserve the credit. Thank you.
And then on just a personal note, I've moved my law practice basically from Newton to Medfield today, so I'll be operating out of Medfield from now on, and for the duration, however long that is.
Mark?
I just wanted to give you a quick update outside of Medfield. Starting last week, a number of municipal lawyers that I am involved with started a working group that started last Wednesday with a call where there were close to 150 municipal attorneys as well as state officials, and we identified a lot of areas of legislative deficiency, many of which have existed for years and which have been pointed out for years and nobody's done anything about them, and now they've come to a head. And that includes time constraints on having elections, time constraints on having town meetings, the needs in towns in particular to have budgets within a time period, those sorts of things. So we followed up Wednesday. By Wednesday, we had a draft of legislation provided to us that the governor was submitting to address these. It's a bill with, I think, about 10 sections, most of which deal with towns. It's kind of a Band-Aid approach, but it's to get us through the immediate threat. So we were working yesterday and today on suggesting edits to that and other areas that we thought needed to be addressed that were not being addressed, which includes, most importantly, in the case of the land use regulatory local bodies, that there be no approvals by default because of board's failure to act within the time periods provided. There's numerous instances in the case, in the statutes, where if a board, Board of Health, Planning Board, ZBA, doesn't act within a specified period of time, the applicant gets what it is they wanted, and we just can't have that. So we've suggested that be stayed or told. Moving forward, the legislation from the governor would essentially, as far as town meeting, allow the moderator the same authority he now has by Section 10A to postpone based on weather-type things, catastrophes, emergencies. They're broadening that language. There is some flexibility being added if the meetings cannot be held even within that time frame, and also the issue of at what point you get a budget done, and if you can't, what happens. Cities actually have the statutory authority to continue ahead with a 1/12 basis. That's in the law. Towns don't have that same benefit, but they're proposing to give towns that. So that's all. The legislation has actually been filed with the House. I understand it's already gone to committee and hopefully will be expedited.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Because for our town meeting, we've probably got to figure it out by the end of April, right? Because we can't have, I don't think we have town meeting beyond the end of the school year. And so to give ourselves a month in the mailing of the warrant report, we probably got to know by the end of April.
Or with this kind of continuing a resolution type
Right.
authority, we could actually move the town meeting, if we had to. So don't count on it. Right.
COVID-19
Yeah, no idea.
Just turns into a
Right.
widespread disaster, that's going to change it.
We're thinking positive, though.
I know we are, but we have to look, I'm trying to look at worst-case scenarios, unfortunately.
So for my part, I mentioned I did go to Vine Lake for at least the interment of Phil Burr, and it was nice. There was a crack Marine honor guard there, number one. So it was very well done. It was kind of a semi-miserable day. The group was fairly small. The whole thing, there were people that wanted to be involved, but the way the message came out about no large groups, I think that broke it apart a little bit. But it was a well-conducted gravesides event because of they were just crack Marines. They were really good. You can tell when they shoot the salute and you only hear one report from 3 rifles. They know what they're doing. They were good. 2 comments. One, part of me over this last week, and both on my professional side, my business, we have clients that are asking us to rethink how we do work, and clearly here in town, we've had to rethink how we do work. And so there's a piece that's almost intellectual for me that steps back and said, this is an interesting, I don't want to trivialize the threat, but in a sense it was a drill in the sense that we don't have enemy bombers coming over and dropping bombs on Medfield or something like that, but there's a community threat. Some parts of it are almost hard to see, and some parts of it even are a little hard to believe because it hasn't manifested itself fully. But watching how the town, not just, certainly the town government, and to Christine and Nick's credit as the leaders of the town government, but the town, and the kinds of communications and conversations that have gone on across the town. Society's a fragile thing, but if you have people who are committed to it, you can withstand more pressure than if you don't. And I think in Medfield we do. I would point out, and Pete, you may be able to help me, or Mike, there are actually a couple of spontaneous groups that are formed. I know Evan Weisenfeld started one of them. Nothing formal, nothing permanent. It's just that, listen, if there's people out there that need help, let us know, and we'll see if we can't connect you. And then there's another group, and just because I'm not familiar with them, it's got 2 names to it. It's something and something or something like that. And there's I just can't remember the name, so I'll apologize for not pushing that.
The Medfield Foundation has actually a public need fund.
That's a third thing, I think, yeah.
Through the Medfield Youth Outreach and the
Right.
UCC Church. And that's always been there to assist families in Medfield that are in need.
Right, and Pete, we got an email from the new minister at the Baptist Church basically saying, listen, I got a building right across the street from your town hall. It's there, let us know if you need it, which,
Extremely generous offer.
yeah, and what I like, he's, I think, the newest clergyman in the town, and the fact that his first reaction was, in some ways, because of the way our society's gone, I think the clergy, as what used to be a pillar of the community, has been eroded, not necessarily through their own fault, but just because of the way we look at stuff. And I found it refreshing to know that there's still that kind of spirit and that interest.
And that his congregation was willing to make that
Yeah.
huge offer.
Right, and I think that's a critical, even given all the limitations, that's part of what makes a town like this the town that it is, and so it matters. And lastly, I would be remiss not to recognize Medfield Cable TV, because that's the other thing, given the circumstances where we don't want people in the room, suddenly all of the workings of government, or 90% of the workings of government, devolve to what can you do online, what can you do through TV. I don't know how many people are watching tonight, but it's... Oh, I
You're
can...
watching. We feel you.
Okay. My point, I think probably a general statement over the last year is that my appreciation for the role that Medfield TV, the local cable TV, plays in helping promote the transparency that everybody says that they want, the access to information that maybe some people who can't get here have. My respect and regard for the importance of community TV has only gone up. And it just happened to be that tonight we probably pushed everything to the max in terms of having that be the main channel. So Medfield TV, thank you very much. That's all I have.
There are a couple comments on Facebook.
Great. Oh, yes. So this is like, this is question and answer period. This is great.
Comments, right?
No, throw them out there. Come on.
Jean Mignot, I think Helping Hands was that the name of the organization?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Gene.
Scott McDermott, thanks to all of you for keeping Medfield moving and for your concern for all of our neighbors. And then Fred Davis commented, appreciation of Christine for all that she does and for all that she said tonight. Thank you to our awesome elected and professional staff maintaining our town now amidst an unprecedented emergency. Those are the three. There are a couple of questions earlier which were about the audio.
Boy, we should start, those fan letters at the end, we should just build that into the agenda.
Everyone's a little punchy with the quarantine.
Well, that's the end of my
Thank you for those
list.
comments to Gene,
you.
Fred, and Scott.
Yes, thanks, Gene.
And Fred, I owe you an email. It's coming.
All right. I don't have anything else.
No, I've held, we usually carry our next meeting dates. I've held that until we have a better handle on what we're doing and working with the warrant committee. Obviously, we wanted to make sure we could have our public participation set up before we move forward, and we're hoping to improve that as we go. No matter how long we have to do this, any way we can improve is always good. And your informational Evelyn has if you want to look at it, but there was just some minor things.
Okay.
That's it. And just a reminder to people, all of our information is going out on our dedicated website. We're trying to keep everything on there to keep everybody updated. We're also using Facebook and Twitter, but all of our memos, all of our notices are on the website. And please sign up for our new emergency alerts program that we launched a little early than we had intended, but timely.
You just prompted one thought, and it's good you hear Mark and Nick and all of you. I had one thought, and I don't know it's at all appropriate for the town to do it. There are restaurants in town. I think the one I happened to see was Avenue posting their menu, which is a takeout or delivery menu. And I was just wondering, is there any way, and this is because it's kind of crassly commercial, it's why I'm not sure we can use the town website. Is there any way that we can get a website set up for all the, because we don't know which restaurants are offering takeout, and basically have online menus, just like Avenue did, that shows, here's what we have, it's either takeout or it's takeout and delivery, here's where you call, here's how far we do it. Because I think there's a lot of interest in town, if we're trying to help the restaurants do well.
Yep.
At a time when a lot of people who obviously can't go out to dinner are actually inclined to want to help those restaurants. If there was some way to put something online that's open, open to all the restaurants to say, here's what we got.
Why don't we invite them all to submit the link to their menus and,
Yeah.
The link would be a link.
So do it the link, so maybe that'd be the way to do
It's
it.
not uncommon for community websites to connect to
Okay.
businesses.
And then the other, that, you raised that point, you mentioned that, Gus, and I did see that some communities, I don't know what authorization we would have, are letting the restaurants do takeout of alcohol as well, because that's such a big part of their revenue. Would we have the authority to offer that
No.
relief from the license? No.
No.
And
That's
not
a
only
state.
that brings up the other point, which is the ABCC has actually just issued an order that anyone, including the farmers, brewers, no consumption of alcohol on premises. They don't want people sitting around drinking and eating.
Right,
And you can't have a glass of wine while you're waiting for your takeout, just so everybody knows.
right.
Hey, Mark, I'm just surprised that group of lawyers you had didn't include a clause about allowing
About
delivery of
Alcohol delivery.
We did
beverages.
talk about package stores.
Okay,
That was just
okay.
something available.
Okay.
We didn't want anything more shut down.
Oh, they are going to be available. They're keeping the food supply lines and the alcohol supply lines
Yes.
open.
And just so you know, Sarah posted under the planning board site, and we'll do a call out on the front site, some support for small businesses during this and some information to help them keep moving. So we'll send that out to them as well.
Okay, okay. Are we done? Motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hang in there, everyone. Thank you.